And welcome to Sasquatch Says. As always, I am your host, Dan Westheim. I am back. Unfortunately, Callie got called in at the last minute, so she has to go save toes while we talk about ice hockey. Wow, don't know where that came from. Anyways, let's move on. Let's jump into what's going on today. As you all know that are following the Avalanche, if you don't know, preseason just ended a couple days ago. Going forward, every game counts. Preseason is over. All the games that don't matter are now done. And after that is all said and done, the Avalanche have a 3-2-1 preseason record. Is there anything that we should be able to glean from that record? As it is with every other preseason, not really. I mean, you got to see some nice things from a Bo Byram, a Ben Myers. Got to see some of the new cats, the new goalie, Georgiev, etc. Got to see a lot of rookies, a lot of potential. Matt Mock, him coming up, or not Matt Mock. Wow, Kaut coming up, possibly making this roster, which is very exciting for Avs fans, as we have been waiting to see this kid finally crack the roster for several years now. Just always seems he comes up just a little bit short, but I think with all the movement this offseason, players that have left, etc., has opened up an opportunity. I think he just might squeak in there, and we'll get into that as well here later. But main positives that have been seen, goaltending looks really good outside of, a couple of losses, but that wasn't the starting goaltending that you had to worry about. Those first couple of losses in the beginning of the preseason when they were going up against Minnesota and Vegas, those were backup goalies, a lot of backup defensemen. So as far as being worried about those first three losses, don't be. It was their backups, rookies, minor leaguers, etc. against ours. It's a wash, okay? Their backups were better than our backups on that day. It is what it is. The Broncos, geez, man, my head has got to get straight. The Avalanche have an extremely loaded roster at the actual pro level. When it comes to the AHL, it's been kind of depleted between all of the promotions, as we all know, Cale Makar, Bo Byram, etc. When you bring those guys up from the minor leagues, it helps the big league club, but it obviously hurts the minor league club. So a lot of those guys have already graduated. Cout's one of the few top prospects that are left. So the fact that the Minnesota Wild and Vegas Golden Knights were able to take care and dispatch of a very weak Avalanche depth, then it is what it is. The games that you should have been paying attention to were the last couple of games, the ones against Dallas, where you did get to see a pretty good amount of starters. You didn't get to see every starter, and you didn't get to see many of them for very long, because of course you don't want to get them hurt. You just want to get them out there, get their feet wet, knock off some of the rust, then get them back off the ice and get them ready for the regular season, which again starts this coming Wednesday up against the Chicago Blackhawks. So we're all looking forward to that, but there's some negatives. There's some worries about the way this defense protects their net. They are a very physical team. I will give them that. They out-hit their opponent in every game except for the last one against Dallas, which they won, despite the fact that they were out-hit by Dallas, but the fact that they were able to out-hit every other team, not just out-hit them, but out-hit them by double digits in every other game. So that being a new, I guess, edge is the word I'm looking for, a real defensive-minded edge to this team that might actually, believe it or not, as scary as it might be, take this team to another level. Last year's Avalanche were able to play defense well enough and then just outscore every opponent. They would just bludgeon their opponents to death. They just keep beating them over the head until they submitted. This year, you might actually see a lot more of those 5-1, 6-1, 7-2 games because the goaltending is better. I do believe with Georgiev. I'm not saying that he's a world beater. I am not saying he's the second coming of Wall, but I will say that he is definitely looking better than Kemper ever did. And that's saying a lot for a guy that just won a Stanley Cup. That is no disrespect to Kemper. Georgiev is younger, he's hungrier, so therefore he's got a little bit more athleticism. So he's going to look a little bit better at times. So if he can get more consistent in the net, the Avalanche might have got themselves a good one that they can actually hold on to more for more than just a year, as it seems to have been the rinse and repeat cycle in net for the Avalanche over the last couple of years. I think Georgiev can be that guy that finally solidifies it for at least a couple of years. I'm not saying he's Patrick Wall. I'm not saying he's going to hold down the fort for a decade, although you don't know. He's got some peripherals that look really good that show he might be able to be a long-term answer, but that's yet to be seen. I don't want to put it on the kid. I just want to say Georgiev, Francouz, I think you're going to be a fine combo in net with, again, another dominant offense along with a seemingly improved defense that is a much nastier, just physical presence so far in the preseason. We'll see if that registers over into the regular season, but as far as the preseason, it looks like Sakic wanting to get more physical in the offseason has paid dividends, at least through the preseason. So next up, as I stated earlier, can Kaut make the roster? I do believe so. Not just because he's a high draft pick, but because just everything seems to be lining up. All the planets seem to be coming into alignment, and it just seems like this might be his best chance. And he's been given the most chances that he has had up until this point. He has played very sparingly, even in the preseason, up until this year. And this year, they have just thrown him out on the ice and kept him out there as long as they possibly can. That's safe, and let him play. And he's rewarded them. He's had a couple of game winners. He's scored the most points, the most goals. He's tied for the most hits. He has been doing everything across the ice. You can see he wants it. He can smell it. And I do believe he's going to close the deal. And we'll know over the next 24 to 48 hours whether or not that's the case. But I do believe he will make the final roster. And we will find out again very shortly. So, excuse me, any surprise roster decisions to watch? This team is so loaded. I just don't see any just out of left field roster decisions being made. Probably the wildest one again is going to be Kaut on whether or not he makes it. That's going to be the biggest decision. But outside of that, this roster is pretty much set between the free agents, the guys they brought back, plus getting Ben Myers for a full season. All of those things equate to the fact that there's just not enough room on this roster for somebody to just overwhelm them. There's just too much overwhelming talent already. It's really hard to be overwhelming. You would have to be like just greatest of all time good to make this roster and bump one of these other guys off really about anywhere. Because as we stated earlier, very depleted minor league system. The AHL system with the Avalanche has been depleted between promotions and trades. There's just not really much there. So again, outside of Kaut being a high draft pick, there's just nothing really else there. So there's no really surprises to be had. So don't get your hopes up if you were hoping to see something crazy. If so, look at another roster because I don't see it happening in Denver. So biggest storyline to watch entering the season is going to be, does this defense carry over the physical nature from the preseason? As we discussed earlier, they out-hit every team, even the Stars once. They just didn't do it the second game. won both against the Stars, but that much more physical nature, the want and look for the big hit has been prevalent through the preseason. And let's hope that continues, because that, I do believe, would bring a whole nother level to this team, as it was something that I screamed about over and over last year. It always seemed that when the Avalanche were more physical, when they out hit the other team, they dominated. When they didn't, they still won more than they lost, but they didn't look like the world beaters they did when they were the more physical, up in your face type of team. And I want to see more of that. This team could be historically good if they could add that physical edge with just a little bit better goaltending. The goaltending doesn't have to be leaps and bounds better. The Avalanche just won a Stanley Cup with Kemper. So obviously you don't need an all-time great in the net to take this team to the promised land. But if they're just a little bit better, this team, again, could be historically great. And we get to see it all happening against Chicago and Denver on Wednesday. We're all, I know, looking forward to it. So speaking of that, like I said, they start the season at home, fittingly so. Stanley Cup champion should always start at home, just like I believe every champion for every league should start at home. It's just rude not to give your champion at least that modicum of respect. But thankfully, we don't have to worry about screaming at the NHL about this, because they did give the Avalanche a home game to start against Chicago. I do believe this is one of those that the NHL is just really trying to push this rivalry home. But the problem is, a rivalry is only a rivalry when both teams win. Over the last several years, there's only been one team winning in this quote unquote rivalry, and that is the Avalanche. They have been absolutely dismantling the Blackhawks. I really wanted Callie here so she can give me her view. I'm sure she can give you more in depth. But to me, that's just where it breaks down to. You cannot consider something a rivalry if both teams don't win. That feels like an oxymoron to me. So the NHL pushing this into the front, I think it feels much more like a cupcake game to try and ensure that the Stanley Cup champions win the first game, which I don't think was necessary. And I mean, I say that with a grain of salt because I don't want to put that on the NHL schedule makers. It just kind of feels that way. It just feels like it was some college scheduler at Auburn scheduling a game against Appalachian State for their first game or for their homecoming. It's just one of those cupcake games that that you better win, or otherwise everybody's going to lament you, and you better dominate, because even if you just squeak by, people are going to talk about you. So I do believe the Avalanche will come in, will do a bit of domination. Chicago is, I do believe, in full tank mode. The moves they've made, the players that they've gotten rid of, and what they've gotten in return, it just screams tank. It just screams tanking for the number one overall pick. There is a good kid that's coming out in this next draft, so it would make sense to tank if you were going to tank. It'd probably be this is one of the years you'd want to, because there is one of those generational talents coming out, a couple of them. But that's going to bode very bad for Blackhawks fans this season. I feel sorry for Blackhawks fans. I know y'all have been through a just roller coaster ride of suckitude over the last few years. Trust in all of us here in Avalanche territory that tell you we understand, we get it, we've been there. We are now at the top of the mountain, but we were at the bottom not too long ago. So we completely understand what you're going through. I feel sorry for you. Please just steel yourself. Don't be surprised. Just be ready for it. Don't let their suckitude shock you. If they end up being better than average, then hey, it is what it is. But I don't know of a single pundit that believes the Blackhawks are going to be anything other than just absolutely horrible. And I'm kind of sorry for y'all that y'all have to be on national TV game one against my Avalanche, because it's going to get nasty. So with that being said, let's go ahead and give the predictions. I do believe, again, Avalanche are going to win this one. I believe it's going to be handily. They're going to come out. They're going to be putting up the banner. They're going to be having to give back the Stanley Cup, because it's going back for another round until they get back to the Stanley Cup finals, hopefully again this year. They are going to be absolutely motivated in their home to make sure that they start this season off right. And I do believe it's going to be a barn burner where the Avalanche end up coming out of this 6-2. That is my final prediction. Avalanche win 6-2 over the Blackhawks. And then we have next up a back-to-back. Is the NHL out to break the Avalanche? They have like 5 back-to-backs in the first month, and the first 2 games of the season are back-to-back. And they have to go all the way from Denver to Calgary, going back an hour. I know it all sounds like it's ho-hum, professional athletes. That takes a toll. And Calgary's not a bad team, even after the offseason where they were a bit of a surprise to not add as much as you thought they would, but they didn't lose as much as you would hope to see from a division rival. So they are still a very, very good team. This is a team that fought hard in both the regular season and the playoffs against the Avalanche. So with Calgary coming back in this back-to-back, it's in Calgary. It's going to be a heck of a test. And so I'm going to really like to see how the Avalanche are able to really respond from that quick turnaround into another time zone, into another team's barn, and see how they react to that first thing off rip of the regular season where they really haven't gotten their sea legs up underneath them. Let's see if they wobble. Do they fall? Do they stand tall? This is going to be a great early test for this Avalanche team just to see how much moxie and metal they really have and how much they can bounce back from in a very, very quick turnaround. So is this the Avs' greatest threat to a repeat? I do believe so when it comes to their own division. Obviously, Tampa Bay Lightning are still a very good team, and they're still the favorites for the Avalanche to end up going back to back with and fighting for the Stanley Cup again in back-to-back seasons. But as far as in their own division, in their own conference, Calgary, I think, is one of the biggest threats. I mean, there's always the Dallas Stars that seem to give them trouble. Columbus Blue Jackets always seem to give them a little bit of trouble. But the Calgary Flames are one of those teams that just, they have enough. They have enough scoring between them and the Oilers. Those are probably the 2 biggest threats to the Avalanche's perch atop the mountain. So seeing them be able to get them early in the season, get a gauge of just how much trouble they're going to be, is going to be a nice little test and a nice little viewing and storyline for us to watch as well. Is do the Avalanche come out and dominate and show that they are far and beyond the greatest team in the league this year, or do Calgary give them a fight? Is Calgary able to stick in there with them and either make it close or even eke out a victory? Hopefully not, but you just never know in NHL. There's a lot of games, and this is the beginning of the season. Not everything's going to be, a well-oiled machine at this point. They still need to knock off some rust. They still need to, get back into the groove of things. It's only the second game of the season. So to assume that the Avalanche are going to be able to dominate another really good team. I know I just got done talking about how they're going to dominate the Blackhawks, but these are 2 teams on completely other ends of the spectrum. Calgary is fighting for Stanley Cups while Blackhawks are fighting for the number 1 overall pick. There's no comparison between these 2. So that's why the drastic switch in my attitude towards it, really. So again, with all that being said, predictions again for the Avalanche versus the Calgary Flames on next Thursday. This is going to be so quick to come around, guys. I can't believe how quick it's been since June when we last saw the Avalanche out there and hoisting that Stanley Cup and dropping it and then hoisting it again. So think about how quickly those couple of months went by. Imagine how quickly these couple of days are going to go by. We're going to see these back-to-backs Wednesdays and Thursdays. Already told you 6-2 on Wednesday, and I do believe they do complete the back-to-back. I do believe they beat the Calgary Flames, and this one's going to be a much tighter game. I do believe a 3-2 final is going to be Calgary. So 6-2 against Chicago, 3-2 against the Calgary Flames, with the Calgary Flames showing that they can stick in the ring and at least go a full round with the defending champs here. So, unfortunately, it doesn't look like Callie's coming in, and I've kind of blown through these topics because it's just kind of how I do things when I'm by myself. I'm sorry, but no comments, nothing of that nature. So hopefully I gave you enough of a primer for the upcoming season premiere of the Avalanche on Wednesday. We will be back next Friday. Let's cross our fingers and hope that Callie doesn't get called in on the 14th. We'll be here from 5 to 6 with Callie, hopefully be able to review these games. And when we talk to you next, there will be real hockey played. So we hope you enjoy the real hockey. We will. Look for us on Twitter. We got it right down here. Make sure you go ahead and click on all the links, subscribe. They're all down below in the description. On Twitter, we will be live tweeting at least the season opener with the Avalanche. We'll be having a lot of fun there. Hopefully, Callie will be able to join us, but she will be working, but I'm sure she will be tweeting here and there. So make sure you check us out on Twitter for that. And until next time, guys, for the Answer is 42, I'm Dan Wetstein, the Sasquatch Says podcast. Don't question the blue.